I won't start talking until I see some folks join.
Should I be looking for something?
You should get a notification saying Leah Phifer is live now. Yep. I see we've got at least one person here. Yay, Missy's in the room. Welcome to Happy Half Hour with Leah Q&A. We're just going to take a few more minutes here while some folks join. I see we've got at least 3 or 4 folks here. And then I will do a little explanation, a little introduction, and I look really forward to reading and answering your questions that you type in the comment bar. So like I said, we'll just give this a couple more minutes to let some folks join, and then we'll get started. Kristen's here, and Barb, and both Sue. Welcome, thank you for joining. Good, we're getting, Dylan's here. Hello, Barb. Hi, Kristen. I'm excited to talk to you as well. And Wesley, thank you. My Duluth folks in the house. So excited to see you. I'll go ahead and get started and just give a short introduction, kind of explain how we go about these fun happy hours. Once again, my name's Leah Phifer. I am seeking the DFL endorsement to represent Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. I'm here in my grandma's home in Duluth. I'm here with my campaign manager, Sue Hakes. Sue will be trying to capture some of the questions in the comment bar that may scroll through before I have a chance to address them. She will be passing those questions along to me to ensure that I don't miss any, but if 1 or 2 do get by, rest assured I will answer those in the comments after the video is done. So I really look forward to hearing your questions, concerns, thoughts for the district. I do travel the district quite regularly. I am in Duluth, as I mentioned. Now I'm heading out to Grand Rapids on Monday. I'll be in Little Falls on Sunday, all over the district. But this is just a fun, relaxed atmosphere for me to talk with people who may not be able to come and meet me live and in person at some of the events that we have around the district. So thank you so much for joining today, and thank you, Kristen, for sharing this. Once the video is done, we will also be able to share the video, and for anyone who wasn't able to log in and ask their questions live. So with that, I will just encourage everyone to type anything in the comment bar that might have crossed your mind, suggestions, comments, questions about my vision for the district, as well as what you would like to see from your representation. So since we're waiting for a few more folks to weigh in, I'll just give a brief background about myself. I grew up in Two Harbors, not far from where I am right now in Duluth, and I went on after leaving Two Harbors to move to Isanti. I spent a lot of time there with my family, though I did go out east for college where I studied Spanish. That degree in Spanish led to a 10-year career in national security. I started off as a Spanish translator in a detention center for undocumented immigrants, where I spent 6 years seeing broken federal policy up close and personal every single day. After those 6 years, I went on to work counterterrorism for the FBI, also right here in Minnesota, which was another different example of federal policy that's often disconnected from the folks that it's supposed to protect. I saw one most salient example was the case of the 9 young men who tried to travel from Minneapolis to Syria to join ISIS. And for me, that was an example of how too often in the federal government we impose very strict sentences on people who are very lost, and looking for a place to belong. And these 9 young men thought they found a place to belong in ISIS. So many of them were sentenced to up to 35 years in prison. And they were sentenced to a prison system that is not equipped with a de-radicalization program, is not equipped with the tools and resources they need to be rehabilitated. So 35 years, when they are released, they're going to be more lost, more angry, and possibly more frustrated than they went in. And that is a public safety threat and something that I would like to see change. So these are all examples of some issues I've encountered throughout my career, though I'm happy to answer more questions about my background, my time with Immigration Customs Enforcement, my time at the FBI, as well as what I heard on my 80-day listening tour this summer. I left the FBI shortly after President Trump fired Director James Comey. I submitted my resignation 3 days later, and I hit the road. I hit the road to listen to everyone in the 8th District, all 18 counties. I covered 7,000 miles to understand how we can start winning this seat by larger margins. To understand how a seat that has been blue 70 of the past 72 years is now barely hanging on by a thread. We won by 0.5 percentage point last year. And what I heard is a lot of frustration throughout the district. What I heard are a lot of good DFLers, a lot of Democrats who haven't been showing up. They're just not feeling the connection to their current representation. And I would like to make sure that we have that connection with our residents from International Falls to Isanti, Grand Rapids, Brainerd, and everywhere in between. So that's why I'm here today, to answer your questions and see what you would like in your representatives, so that we can make sure we're winning this district by much larger margins, to make sure that we have that strong connection with our representation that is required to hold this seat going forward. So I see we've got lots of people joining, but not lots of people asking questions yet. So I saw Kristen had mentioned something about climate change earlier, and I will just dive into some of my thoughts in that area while I wait for other folks to chime in with some of their questions. So Kristen Larson asked about my vision and thoughts for combating climate change. I know that climate change is the most pervasive threat that we face currently. I say pervasive because it affects every area. It affects our economy, it affects our infrastructure, it affects our livelihoods. So we need to make sure that we are using all of our resources to combat it. I was very disappointed to see that the Trump administration took climate change off the list of national security threats a few months ago, because it is absolutely a national security threat. I would like to see a carbon fee and dividend program implemented, and there are a lot of good programs out there that are being out-of-the-box ideas that are being looked at to make sure that we are having people invested in lowering carbon emissions and investing in carbon revenue projects, such as a no-till and low-till for farmers that will help carbon sequestration in the soil, and making sure that we're holding on to that. Deforestation is also a huge issue that leads to increased climate change damage. So as far as being incredibly disappointed with the administration and their thoughts on combating climate change, I think that there's a lot that we can do on a bipartisan realm, and joining forces with our Republican colleagues to make sure that we are treating climate change with the seriousness and gravity that it deserves. Some other issues, and like I said, I see that we've got lots of folks joining, but not a lot of folks chiming in yet. So please feel free to type your comments into the taskbar off to the side, and I will get to them as soon as they pop up. But some other areas that we're looking at on my team is really treating clean energy solutions through an economic development lens. So over the next couple weeks, we will be rolling out 3 parts of an economic development plan that addresses some of the most serious issues I heard about during my 80-day tour this summer. We'll be starting with the part of the plan that's called Working Lands, and Working Lands will look at infrastructure, expanding rural broadband, and investing in clean energy solutions. The next part is called Working People, and that's talking about investing in small businesses, investing in healthcare solutions, and investing in entrepreneurs, from people who want to start grocery stores to people who want to start art galleries in underserved areas of the district. The third part is called Working Together, and Working Together addresses some of the most salient issues that we're hearing about, especially in terms of this jobs versus environment conversation that we are too often struggling with. So I look forward to rolling out that plan starting on Monday. And if you want to sign up for the mailing list, you can do so at Phifer for Congress accompanying.com on the homepage. We'll be mailing that out, but we'll also be posting it on Facebook. So if all of you are Facebook followers, you will see that coming out Monday with a sneak preview coming out later tonight. I see a question from Barb. Please talk about how you're going to have the very difficult conversation about precious metals mining with the miners on the Iron Range. Thank you so much, Barb. That is a very, very important question. So I come from 4 generations of men who worked in the mining industry. My dad was at North Shore Mining. My grandfather retired as president of EVTAC Mining, and my great-grandpa was at Mahoning, as was his dad. So the mining industry is incredibly important to me, as it is to many people in northeastern Minnesota and around the world. I always envision a role, and an increased role even, for mining, but we have to realize that with automation, the mining industry won't be employing as many people as they did during my grandpa's age. And my grandpa knew that automation was coming, and he always told me, Leah, we don't protect the jobs, we protect the workers, because the jobs are going to change. And that's what I look to do, is to protect the workers, make sure we're working with labor and unions and having these hard conversations about how the jobs are going to transition and look a little different in the next 5, 10, 15 years. One of the things that I always talk about is the personal connection. When I was up in Ely, as Jarrett says here, thanks for taking so many opportunities to connect with people. You have supporters in Ely. I was up in Ely last week, and though I have come out against the Miner Act, which would facilitate the Twin Metals mine, I did talk to quite a few Twin Metals supporters and even folks who are employed by Twin Metals. I thought maybe the conversation would be tough, but you know what? We really had a great talk, because a lot of those guys knew my dad. They worked with him for 35 years. My grandpa gave one of them their first job in the mining industry, and we cannot underestimate that emotional connection. Knowing and understanding in their hearts that I respect the mining industry because it put food on my family's table for 4 generations. So if we start from a place of mutual respect and then move out talking about how we're going to protect our lands and our waters while always having a room for mining in our economy, is a great place to have that conversation. So thank you so much for that question, Barb. Brandon asked if there's been any discussions of planning a debate with Congressman Nolan. There have been. I am looking very much forward to having a debate with Congressman Nolan. I think that it's incredibly important, especially when you have 2 people who are in the same party. We obviously share some of the same values. I stand for single-payer health care, as does Congressman Nolan. It's really important to have a debate to iron out those differences. There are some very, very detailed differences between Congressman Nolan's approach and my approach to many issues. So I look forward to having a debate and giving people the opportunity to hear those differences going into caucuses on February 6th. So please, if you know any groups, Our Revolution, League of Women Voters, especially up in the Duluth area where we have a lot of progressive activist groups that would be interested in hosting a debate, tweet at them, send them Facebook messages, emails, ask them if they would be willing to host, because I am very much looking forward to having a forum or debate before precinct caucuses on February 6th. We had a question from Missy. What can be done on the federal level to strengthen our small farms and the need to develop our farm-to-table infrastructure, especially here in the Arrowhead, so we are not so overshadowed by big ag? That is a really good question. Especially, I look at this as a generational question too. When I traveled the district, I saw a lot of farmers around my age who are going back to their parents' farms, and they want to start doing sustainable organic farming in a different way than their parents did. And they're looking at smaller yields and smaller acreage, and they're wondering how they can sustain a livelihood in that realm. One of the greatest things that we can do is expand healthcare options. So many people that I spoke to are not able to sustain a living in farming because of their incredibly high healthcare premiums. So expanding single-payer healthcare is one huge step in getting more small businesses and small farmers into sustainable practices. Another area that we can look at is making sure that we are providing enough federal grants and enough seed money for people who don't have resources to invest in the tools that they need. So there's a lot of programs out there that need additional resources so that we have small farmers equipped with what they need to get started. We have a small section on that in the economic development plan, but I am always looking for ways, especially talking to farmers, and I believe Missy falls into that category, on their ideas on how we can make sure we're supporting small farmers going forward. I missed a couple of questions up there, and I'm sorry about that, but I think Sue will be sending me a couple of messages here. So we have a question that Sue just caught for me, and it says, the 8th district has a lot of gaps in broadband services. Do you have a plan to get broadband across the 8th, especially in rural communities? Absolutely. Our rural broadband plan is the first part of the economic development plan that is being rolled out because it is one of the most important parts of the plan that connects all the other parts. We can't possibly expect our healthcare professionals, our miners, our students, our teachers to compete in a 21st century economy when we don't have equitable broadband access across the state. So what we did is we looked at the governor's task force on expanding rural broadband, and we built that out as to what can be done on a federal level. We're looking at increasing the tax on some of our telecommunication companies because frankly they can afford it, so that we get the additional investment that we need to roll out broadband in the next 5 years. We need to make sure that everybody is reaching gigabit broadband in the next 5 years in all areas across the 8th and across the nation. So I look very much forward to sharing that plan with you more in detail, all the nitty-gritty percentages and numbers coming out on Monday. So look for that, and thank you for asking the rural broadband question, because it is a travesty facing too many of our communities across the district. I have another question here. What risks do you see concerning voter suppression tactics by Republicans? Is that a problem in Minnesota? It's a problem across the nation. One of the most prevalent concerns I can think of is actually occurring in Wisconsin. So my partner, Jason Buck, went to UW-Madison, where they recently came up with a wonderful law that you cannot use your college ID to register to vote. That is a blatant example of trying to suppress voters, especially young voters who are sometimes more inclined to vote for the Democratic Party. If you are going to college and you often are on a campus where you don't need a car and you don't have a driver's license and you haven't gotten a passport, what is your form of ID? Your form of ID is a college ID. So that is one of the most concerning aspects of voter suppression to me, is looking at how they are silencing the voices of young people, silencing the voices of the elderly, silencing the voices of people of color. And it's one of the greatest things that we need to confront in 2018 and 2020 as we look at bringing back the House and the Senate into Democratic control so that we can start fighting these voter suppression laws. Another question that I have here is, how do you want to expand the ICWA and strengthen tribal ties to children in the foster care system? Really good question. Thank you for that. Children in the foster care, tribal children in the foster care system is one of the most heartbreaking situations that I have encountered, and I've encountered it long before I started traveling the district, but also while I was working in the criminal justice system. We need to make sure that we are doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that tribal children, that children of Native American communities, are able to stay in their community and stay with their parents in all scenarios possible. Obviously, it's a heartbreaking decision to have to put a child into foster care, and we have some amazing social workers who are trying to do a lot with very little, but I believe that in every circumstance possible, we need to make sure that tribal children are staying in their communities so that they have that consistent access to family ties, to community ties, to everything that gives them the foundation they need going forward. So I want to make sure that we're making those hard decisions and working with tribal communities to make sure that children are staying in the communities at every chance possible. Another question that we have here is, how will you help get the education for employees for the future jobs in automation programming proposed to come to Arrowhead? So talking about automation, and I think I mentioned earlier with talking about my grandpa working in the mining industry, knowing that jobs are going to change, and automation is a huge role to play in how those jobs change. But there will always be jobs in the mining industry, for example. So we need to ensure that the federal government is providing tax credits and incentives to businesses who want to provide apprenticeships, who can provide apprenticeships in existing and new areas of, we're looking at plumbers and electricians and a lot of trades, and making sure that as trades and as jobs in the mining industry, for example, evolve, we have businesses equipped to educate and train the next future generations in those areas. So tax incentives for apprenticeships is a great place to start, making sure that we are investing in debt-free college tuition. I am a strong supporter of Bernie Sanders' College for All Act, and that looks at expanding free public education for all four-year universities. But I also want to see going beyond that and really looking at two-year programs and vocational schools as well. What are we doing to make sure that those programs are free and easily accessible to many folks across the nation? We have an email question here. You say your law enforcement background in Homeland Security and FBI has better prepared you. How will this help you be a better congressperson? My background in national security, specifically border enforcement and counterterrorism, is a unique asset to Minnesota's 8th Congressional District specifically. The 8th Congressional District has a huge Canada that we share with our neighbor, or a huge border that we share with our neighbor to the north, Canada. So we have a lot of issues with a porous border in certain areas, and a lot of what I saw working in FBI were that some of the folks coming across the border that worried us the most were not coming across the southern border. They were coming across our border to the north. We also have Camp Ripley and an international port, which requires a national security perspective that a lot of our Congress members don't have. So I look forward to bringing that perspective to Congress to specifically benefit folks in the 8th District. Let's see here. What are your ideas to reduce the horrendous incarceration rate and systemic racism in the justice system? Very, very good question. One of the most horrendous things I saw while working in the criminal justice system was our reliance on for-profit prisons, as well as our reliance, especially in the federal arena, contracting with state and local and private prisons that are not equipped to provide the resources necessary to protect people in the federal criminal justice system. I give, for example, specifically immigration. So for immigration customs enforcement here in Minnesota, we don't have a federal facility. So everyone who's housed as they're awaiting deportation proceedings are housed in either county, state, or local facilities. A lot of times those facilities are not up to par, up to the regulatory standards that are required by the federal government. And a lot of the human rights abuses that we see are occurring in for-profit private prisons that are used as contractors for federal and state arenas. So I would like to see that completely eliminated. I would also like to see our focus not being on small drug offenders such as people who are using recreational marijuana like Jeff Sessions would like to see done. I know as a law enforcement professional that our resources are very scant and that we need to make sure we are investing those resources wisely. And chasing down nonviolent drug offenders is not the best use of our law enforcement resources. And that is a voice that I would like to bring to Congress as an experienced law enforcement professional. We have a couple other questions. Jill popped in and she says, hi, thanks for doing this. Hi, Jill. I'm in your neighborhood. I hope to see you soon. And I see Lori joined as well. Hi, Lori. We have another email question that I'm going to read here. What are your ideas for improving public education, and do you have a plan for college debt? Absolutely. I am a strong supporter of Bernie Sanders' College for All Act. I think that is one of the crippling factors in our middle class right now. Right now, we have a middle class that cannot work themselves out of six-figure debt. I have a lot of friends and family that fall into that arena, as I'm sure many of you do, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And a lot of this debt is coming not only from affordable housing issues, which we can also get to, but college education. I myself have $60,000 in college debt. Many of the students that I teach at Augsburg are facing $100,000 of student debt or more, and that is absolutely unacceptable. It's preventing us from having the strong, globally competitive economy that the United States needs. It prevents us from having a stable middle class that the economy desperately needs, and we need to make sure that we're making that a #1 priority in Congress. So in addition to supporting the College for All Act, as I mentioned earlier, I would also like to see an increased focus on two-year and vocational programs, making sure that we are allowing equal access to those programs and incentivizing businesses who want to offer apprenticeships for folks deciding to go into vocational programs and trade sectors. We have another comment here. Talk about College for All. What are your thoughts on expanding affirmative action? Have been very concerned with a lot of the affirmative action. We've been taking a lot of steps back in affirmative action, especially in some of the judicial arenas. So I'm especially concerned with this sitting Supreme Court, that affirmative action is going to be one of the first things on the chopping block, in addition to union protections. So I think that if we can't count on our judiciary to protect affirmative action programs, we have to make sure that the legislative arena is doing that. So I would like to see strengthening, expanding, and working with our current affirmative action programs to make sure that we are giving communities of color, people of color, a step up that is still desperately, desperately needed. Jane says there are specific new jobs that are not in mining, and she didn't give this example, but I give the example of clean energy jobs, which we can get to, wind and solar. There are 460,000 projected jobs where Minnesota is lacking. They are attracted to Minnesota in the next 2 to 3 years. I completely agree. I've read through Rebecca Otto's Clean Energy Plan, and if you get a chance to read it, if you haven't, it's excellent because she talks about clean energy in the same way I talk about clean energy. This is an economic development opportunity. Investing in wind, investing in solar, making sure we're engaging in smart trade being trade with partners that we know we can count on, like Canada, to get the solar panels that we need to get a lot of our solar panel plants up and running, making sure that we have access to affordable solar panels for every house in northeastern Minnesota. And a lot of that is going to be dependent on getting smart trade happening with a lot of our partners around the world. So I completely agree with what Jane had to say, that we have hundreds of thousands of jobs outside of the mining sector that we can be investing in, and people who want to come and live here for our beautiful landscape, our water, our nature, sometimes our weather, depending on if you're a winter weather person. But people want to come to Minnesota. We have to make sure we have the strong economy that incentivizes them to do so. Lori says, thank you. Thank you, Lori. Lori has been an incredible member and asset to our team. Lori ran as a state rep, and she is an incredible, we're getting lots of hearts and likes when I say Lori, so I'm going to assume that those are all for you, Lori. She is an incredible leader in her community, and I am so blessed to have her guidance as we look at starting this next chapter of public service. So thank you, Lori, for being a part of this. So Manilan, you talk about businesses in the 8th. What are your thoughts on expanding federal procurement incentives? What communities would you like to see included in these measures? I love this question. So I worked in federal procurement, obviously working for the federal government, and federal procurement is an incredible arena where we can expand access into women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, businesses owned and operated by people of color. The federal government has a unique ability to specifically target those groups, to give them their money, their business. I would like to see that expanded across the board. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, is doing a good job with that, but I would like to see that expanded even more. I believe that right now about 50% of the contracts that go out, depending on which agency you're looking at, go to women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses. I'd like to see that expanded. If we can make sure that, especially in some of our larger arenas, Department of Defense, some of the areas where we're spending the most money, that money is going to veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. It's one of the best things that we can do. Nevada joined us. Hi, Nevada. Thank you for joining us. Aaron and Lisa joined as well. We've been covering some amazing questions, and I know we only have 1 or 2 more minutes here. So I will wrap up and I will check with Sue and see if there's any questions I missed. I apologize. Sometimes the taskbar goes scrolling by really fast. But thank you all for joining us. We will be posting the video after we close down here so that you can go back and revisit some of the questions that were asked. I also am always welcoming questions over email, via Facebook Messenger, Twitter, connect with us on Instagram, and we will be hosting another 2 or 3 of these before precinct caucuses on February 6th. So don't forget, check our website. We have precinct caucus information up there. If you don't know where you're caucusing, you can find that on our website. If you don't know when you're caucusing, you can also find that on our website, as well as some training materials. If you've never been to caucus before and you'd like to learn, we have a short video as well as some handouts. I thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to having another one of these with you very shortly. Thank you so much.